Okay.
So you just play. They're dead. You just play them both and deck them.
Hello, ladies, gentlemen, variations thereupon. I'm AJ Sacher, back with another episode of this video podcast thing. If you want the audio only, go check it out on SoundCloud. If you want the video, there's YouTube. Ta-da! Last time we had Adam Ezegalian on, which was super fun. Definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. Today we have somebody who is a Star City Games Invitational finalist, Channel Fireball content producer. He's one of my favorite streamers, although he never streams. Ever. Beloved rogue deck builder, lover of all things value. It is my good friend Greg Hatch. Now, I love talking to Greg, and we had a lot of fun recording this, but maybe a little too much. We ended up talking for over 4 hours, and not all of it was Magic related. What I'm gonna do is cut this into 2 smaller episodes and edit the hell out of it. And today you'll hear all the Magic-y stuff from like the Pro Tour that just happened, and then the next episode will be the rest of my conversation with Greg, where we just talk about random things and exchange stories and whatnot. I will be back to say a few things at the very end, but for now we're going to jump in mid-conversation. We're talking about like language and pronunciation, which gets me on the topic of the Wizards of the Coast casting of the Pro Tour. So hope you enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. Can we please unify the pronunciation of players' names?
Yeah.
This is like a real thing, and what's sparking it is Shota is pronounced Shota. It is not Shouta, as, some casters said like 40% of the time. It's just not the guy's name. It's like you're calling him Bob,
Well, maybe it was just that they wanted to represent, like if you're talking loudly about him, like it was just like a decibel pun.
Right, and then his last name, like Yasoka, it's a double O, so they say Yasoka or Yaso Oka. Just unify it. First of all, get it right, and second of all, like
it's
every
two syllables,
caster
right?
should
The two
always
O's, like
say the same thing.
Yasaoka or something.
Okay, so the way that Japanese works is like if you directly translate each like character from the hiragana, the alphabet basically, where each letter has its own pronunciation. It's Shouta is how you would directly letter for letter translate it, but a U after an O is just an extension of that O.
Gotcha.
English letters, it's Shota, or for pronunciation would be Sho with like an elongated vowel, whatever that is called, the bar over the O, Ta. It's Shota, it's not Shota, and it's not Shouta, the U just elongates it. This is why you'll see vowels in a lot of Japanese names when translated, like in a Star City article or in a Channel Fireball like profile, whatever, or in the coverage, or in the Japanese coverage. Like there'll just be vowels that like appear and disappear, and it's because sometimes they're turning, they're like what's the hiragana, and then turning that into English letters, and other times they're doing the romaji, which is how they would spell their names in English. Like that's what their passports say. Right. However,
people have to do a lot of work. I mean, like it's basically like the first kind of coding where like we're not really respecting the effort that goes into turning names into another language. Like it's not like words or meanings. It's like a literal just a way that you say someone's name. And because of the effort, or like these weird like dots you put above the O's, and like just ways that you notate in like the best way they know how to like make it very clear as that this is at least this. And then we just go and disregard it and read it as if there's no accent marks whatsoever.
Correct.
like guacamoles, you know, and you're like,
Well,
you gotta stop this, you
and
know.
even languages that use the same alphabet as us, like a lot of nomadic languages, or even Spanish, like a J is just completely different. It's just a completely different letter,
Yeah.
and a lot of people just like don't even recognize that. Although the coverage has gotten better about that, mostly as the European chapter of the coverage has become more and more like a big part of WotC. Uh, the WotC coverage squad, they've gotten better and better about European pronunciations, but they're still just terrible with all the Japanese stuff, which is frustrating because it's so easy. Like, it's so easy to fix. Like, you don't have to learn Japanese. You just have to ask somebody that speaks Japanese
Well,
once.
and you make a good point, but like, you know, and doing coverage, sometimes like you just like don't get around to it because you're like swapping stories and then you're eating and then you just don't get around to it. What there needs to be is a person whose job it is to insist, like, hey, just
Correct.
to let you guys know, there's going to be some names here that I want to make sure like we get right, you
And
know.
this is somebody that should already be on the staff. That should be like the runner's job. When you get
Right.
to
Well,
the
it's one of his duties.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. When you're, telling him or her what they have to do for every round for the weekend, like you have to uh, go seat the people in the right feature match places. Then you have to go get the deck list and bring it to us. One of those things should also be know how to say their names. Like, tell us how to say their names. And again, for things like the Star City coverage, it's a lot harder. Well, first of all, Star City coverage is American, so it's pretty easy most of the time. But if a Star City coverage person like got a name wrong, I get it. Or like a GP, you get a name wrong of like this unknown person, I get it. But a pro tour with a massive budget and a massive coverage team, or presumably much bigger than a Star City coverage team, there's no way that should be falling through the cracks. First of all, for an unknown. But what I'm talking about is a pro tour champion, like future Hall of Famer probably, like a person that is regularly being featured, and you should know how to say his fucking name.
It would be nice. I mean, and what's worse, I think, is that like this would happen at a Japanese pro tour because there's no real motivation to fix it at any other place. So,
Right.
you know, I don't really imagine that this would change, you know, and it would be particularly weird there.
Right. And again, it's a very nitpicky thing because I would not fault people for saying Tamoharu, right? Ru doesn't exist in Japanese. The R is like, it's been described as like 45% R, 45% L, 10% D. Tamoharu is how you would say it.
Oh, interesting.
I
I
don't.
never actually knew what the deal was there.
Yeah. That letter is the same in Japanese, which is why you see like why the stereotype of hero exists, because they just say he, that letter O, and we just hear that it's not the letter that we think it is, so we assume they got it stone wrong when really they just are replacing it, right?
God, you're right. Dude, I'm totally guilty of that. There's like a little piece of it like that assumes that they read words the same way I do. Like at least
Right,
where it's like character, 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 character. Like it's not that way.
right.
There's like a little bit of like the Spanish ella or whatever, like the double L. You know?
Yes, exactly. So what happens is that that the Asian person will say that word as best they can, constructed out of the sounds that are in their own language. What I'm saying is, I do not fault WotC casters to refine their Japanese RL pronunciation. That's a very hard sound for people to get. That's a line. Like, if I'm drawing a line, like that's acceptable, and whatever, you're doing the best you can with the sounds in your language. So I don't expect that, but Shouta versus Shota, that's really like bordering on offensive, I would say.
The way that I like justify it, because I'm definitely guilty of this, but I give me your take on this. I pretty much do it to everything all the time, though.
Okay.
So I feel like it's equal opportunity. Like for example, I'll say like Prodigal Sorcerer, you know? Like, I won't really think much of it, you know? I'll just say it that way, you know? And people will, like, you know, get a weird, like, you know, aneurysm in the, you know, for a second.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
I said tabernacle to barnacle for years before anyone corrected me.
Do that. Well, I mean, I wish it was more popular during the barn days.
Yeah, well, barnacle is a word that I know, and
Yeah.
I don't know the word tabernacle, and I see like parts of that word, and I just said it the way, and that happens a lot for words that you can like see written a lot, but you don't hear said. Um,
That's
there's
hilarious.
there's also some stuff like there's okay, prodigal is a word, is a real word in English.
I have no defense to Prodigal. I have no defense there.
I know, but I'm just using that as an
Yeah,
example
yeah,
in isolation. Like that's a word like there are there's songs with that word in the lyrics. Like that's a normal part of English culture. And thus I think that you're probably pretty dumb or like
Well,
wrong.
no, that's my. I'm just saying. I'm trying to go like from like proper, you know, polite, like through offensive, straight to dumb. Like, so I'm trying to.
Dumb is a totally legitimate defense.
Right. Well,
For
I'm trying to go all the way there.
For you
So,
talking to me, or at a Magic tournament, you could be dumb and it's whatever. For professional casters that are being paid to be there, who it's a huge part of their job to know who these players are and what why they're covering them, to not know how to say their name, that's a very different thing.
yeah.
Another way I was going to take that is prodigal is a normal English word, so you should probably know how to say it. But
Definitely, yeah. I mean, if I had any, yeah, sense about me, sure.
there's some words that are like completely made up for Magic, right? Like a name of a clan or whatever, like
Llanowar is a good one.
yeah.
It's not Llanowar.
If you say that wrong, you're not dumb. That's not on you.
Like Jitty, for example, is a great example.
No, Jitty is a terrible example. Jitty. See, okay, I have to say for my audience here, Greg knows Jitty is a point of contention for me, and is using this against me. The reason that Jitty is not acceptable is because, again, okay, so this is a Kamigawa card, which is a Japanese themed set. If you pronounced it the correct Japanese way, it's jite, okay?
Yeah.
J-I, an I is like E. The way their letters are like, J-I is one letter. And then T, like, the double T means that it's a hard stop.
Oh, I was wondering because there's hard stops in Japanese. I notice just typically. I never knew it like. I thought it was like English, where it just happens sometimes.
No, it's the double consonant is a hard stop, just like the double vowel is extended. So T-E is one letter, just like J-I is one letter. So if it was J-I, T-E, it would be Jide. But since it's a double T, it's Jite. It's a hard stop. The double T, right? Okay, so if you say Jite, 100% you are correct. Now, if you say Jit, I gotta give it to you. Totally fine. Jit is, if you look at that word in the context of how English is constructed and how it's supposed to be pronounced with English letters, it should be Jit. All right? So Jite or Jit.
Little lost in translation. Sure.
Jitty. Is like Jiddy? Jitty? Get jitty with it? It's not close to reasonable.
As a Will Smith fan.
All right, so let's talk about the Pro Tour a little.
Oh yeah, we gotta have like a skip forward thing on there. Skip 50 minutes, we don't hear some nonsense.
We're about I don't know, half hour in or so. Haven't said a word about Magic the Gathering. Mono red.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I like Atarka's Command as much as Game.
It's a Tarka's Command. I'm just kidding. Go on.
Attica's Command. I think it's like the best card ever that is unfortunately uncastable.
I would agree.
I mean, I've seen worse things.
At least you get to free roll the become immense once you're playing the command, right?
I want to take a minute and actually really acknowledge Dang's deck building choices. Not for like the specific like four ofs he chose, but for the one ofs he chose. Because there's something about the single Temple of Abandon that makes me know that he played 100 Goldfish games of this deck. You do not just wake up one day and come and play tap land in your deck. Temple of Abandon feels more like a 15 land draft deck than like a 17 or 18 land draft deck. You know, like it's so far removed from what you'd consider to be reasonable, even though it's correct, or
Right.
you know, ostensibly it could be correct. Like I don't know,
Yeah,
but
you've reached beyond one standard deviation.
yeah, like it's you have to explain yourself at this point. You know, like it's like
Yeah,
wait a
yeah,
second.
yeah.
So what was your reasoning? Was it two down to one? Was it 0 up to one? Like where were you? I know
Well,
you
his
weren't.
numbers are all over the place because he's got the one up
Uh,
become immense, which is like good value.
I was going to touch on this stuff. Yeah, like the become immense was under the exact same reasoning that I have for some other like you know you never are mad at one, and
Right.
you never having two has a significant downside, and so he has a lot of cards like that. There's the Lightning Berserker Dash guy where like you can't really go wrong with one, but having two is the worst ever. You know,
Right.
there's a bunch of those. I love it. Like Frenzied Goblin's another one. Like I'm not sure if
Well,
he
I think Frenzied Goblin is in addition to the like pretty steep diminishing returns, like the second Frenzied Goblin is pretty bad, but also the one Frenzied Goblin is the fourth Zergo Bell Striker because Zergo is a one drop like super powerful, but it's legendary. So like in these compact games, you can't really afford to have like a card rotting for 2 turns. Like you'll just lose. So he went down to 3 Zergo Bell Striker and then like had a slot open and but wanted like the fourth Zergo, so he played a Frenzied Goblin. That's how I read that the first time I looked at the deck list.
I wonder. I mean, it's you know we're all in the guessing game here. My guess would be that like there's certain cards that he loves. Like it like I think what I would guess is that the bad draws were like evaluated over time. Like
Yeah.
you think to yourself, what situations were you in that you just disliked where you were? Like you just stopped and you're like, fuck this deck. Like
Yeah.
and like usually when that happens is when you have like 3 Hordling Outburst, or you have like you know 3 Goblin Rattle Masters, or you have like you know 2 Frenzied Goblins and no 2-drop or something, you know. And it's like, well, you know, I think that once you start like aggregating that information, you end up with these one ofs. But I respect it because playing one ofs means that you have enough confidence to do it and know it's right, you know, because you're gonna get naysayers no matter what, and or you just do not care at all, and that's also cool because you're just playing the game for the love of it. Like
No, I mean, the Become Immense is another one of those like just Become Immense is more visible in terms of like the diminishing returns, right? Like the second Delve card is way worse than the first, and
second pump spell, yes.
second
So
pump spell, second green card. Like there's so, and then if you just apply that to like the Lightning Berserker is the next evolution, right? Like you'll see in a lot of older aggro decks, you'll see like one X spell, like one Demon Fire or Bane Fire or whatever that X spell was at the time, and that's sort of the same theory. But the Frenzied Goblin to me is very different than those.
I think it's yeah, it's like overflow. Like you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
eventually you're cutting and like you know you start at 4 of everything and you go down in order. You know, first the 2 Frenzy Goblins go, then like you know 2 Lightning Dashers go, and then like eventually you know I feel like one of the last cuts was the Zergo Frenzy Goblin split.
No, I agree with that completely. And then you see 2 Rabble Masters, 4 Hordling Outbursts. Like, that's not an accident. The 2 other Goblin Rabble Masters in the board, and then his board has a bunch of 1-ups too. 1 Heel Cutter, 1 Destructive Revelry, 1 Scouring Sands, in addition to like the 4 Eidolon, 4 Roast. Which is also...
You talked about this. I mean, I won't. I'll let you do the bulk of this if you want. But like the benefits of having like instead of a 4 of a sideboard card, like you have a 4 of where they're all different. Like you know they're all different a little bit, and that's enough because that gives you accidental range where really you're not that much worse off. It's like the Relic of Progenitus, Surgical Extraction, Tormod's Crypt split. You know.
Yeah, it just makes it like you have more coverage and it makes it harder to play against you for like minimal investment. Like yeah, sometimes the Tormod's Crypt will be better than the Relic, but sometimes it won't. And there's a lot of like diminishing returns in those too. Like the effect of Goblin Heel Cutter, right? Like it's expensive and bad, exactly. And like the first one's probably really good when you're boarding it in, but the second one I don't think is ever going to be good. So
Yeah,
that makes sense.
you're casting it, and so you have to
Yeah.
really look yourself in the eye tomorrow.
Yeah. Like if you like die like if you die with, a heel cutter that didn't even touch play in your hands, then you'll know the pain. And a further illustration of this is he has 4 Eidolon, and when they interviewed him about his sideboarding for the quarters, he was like, on the play I bring in all 4, on the draw I bring in 2.
Oh, dude, that's something I probably my game needs to be stepped up in that regard. I do a lot of guessing when it comes to on the play on the draw, like
Yeah.
switches. Like there's times where I cut a land on the draw, for example.
Yeah,
Like
that's something I learned from Jerry. Like, I was really, really bad at it when I was like on the pro tour, but when I was doing the Star City circuit and traveling a lot with Jerry and like learning a lot from him, that's one of the things that I really picked up from him was, play versus draw is just so different, and your deck should reflect that.
well, you build ostensibly you build your land bases not based on like tradition. You build it off like ratios.
50-50.
On the play, you're dividing by 7, and on the draw you're dividing by 8.
Right.
It's just like different.
Right.
Speaking of Eidolon to the Rebel and like bringing down the play on the draw, there's like Goblin guides like that too.
Yes.
It's super interesting. Like sometimes you just don't attack, not because like it's like you're not sure whether or not they have a removal spell. Just like period, you just don't attack.
Right.
The 2 damage like literally isn't even worth it here. I'm so much further ahead if I don't take this coin flip.
And like, is them drawing 40% of a card worth potentially 2 damage here?
Yeah, and then how much of a card is a land? Is it 80% of a card, or is it like a full card? Is it a card that actually changes the way their hand works?
Right. If they're drawing like a small fraction of a card 40% of the time, then you're way better off. But if like a land is a full card against decks with brainstorms, or if they're like mana like you probes them and saw that they're gonna miss their next land drop or whatever, and you can get like 2 full turns ahead worth for 1 turn of attacking, then yeah. Basically, Magic is a dynamic and difficult game. Who knew?
Yeah, well, and it's these micro advantages, and like you also like sabotage yourself, because when you give the example with mana open, it gives yourself room to outthink yourself or to justify why you should or should not have attacked in a way that's completely impossible to have a discussion about.
Totally.
But when they're tapped out and you don't attack, like that's a conversation that you'll have an answer to that's super granular. Like you'll be able to come to a real conclusion, and
that's
you better
a clearly like quantifiable spot.
Yeah, and I think that difference is like why you always do the one that's 60% right, because you don't want to be on the wrong side of history,
This type of thing. But
imagine if people did that with judges more often, not really a hometown hero, but like connived or like contrived hometown hero, where like you just know the range that like a person is like, this person calls slow play a lot, so like I can use that to my advantage,
Well, I got hometown.
Could you imagine that? That's God, man.
I got hometown heroed in a GP in New Zealand. I flew to New Zealand, and this was during the time where insufficient randomization was a game loss, and a judge was like watching, and my opponent got game lost for misregging. And the judge came over and was like, "I'm really sorry, but I have to game loss you. You registered wrong, whatever." And I thought he was just like a really empathetic judge that was trying to like be, show sympathy. But he was like friends with the kid, and he was like, the best player in Australia or whatever at this New Zealand GP. And the judge, like after giving the game loss, just stands there and watches, and then game losses me for insufficient randomization when it clearly wasn't, just because it was like his friend and he was trying to. So that's like a real thing that happens. Just
that's like when they charge people for like resisting arrest, when there's no arrest or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's like, well, and it gets because of there's no, if it ever gets to trial, the judge is like, so what was he arrested for originally? Resisting arrest. What do you? Well, wait a second.
Yeah.
I like it's when judges want to get a penalty, they can find anything to do it with.
Oh yeah.
That's the nature of Magic. Comes with the idea that you better have it. The rules are as good as the reasonable subjective nature of the judges enforcing them.
Right, which is part of the reason why some of the higher level judges I have problems with.
Yeah, like there's a reason they call it gray area. It's because it's part of the color spectrum.
Well, there's another like some stuff they'll just put in. Like, I used to be this judge. I had a judge ruling at a major tournament. It might have been like day 2 of a GP, where the judge was the floor judge like came over, and I explained this like very normal situation, and he had to like read both cards that he shouldn't have had to read, and
Should have had to read.
they were like very normal cards and a very normal interaction. He like read them both, and he's like, well, I think what happens, like, I'm pretty sure that, and I interrupted him, and I'm just like, whatever you're gonna say, I'm gonna appeal. So we just like talked to the head judge, and he was like, yeah, okay. And then the head judge came over, like, told me not to interrupt his judge, and then made the correct ruling and walked away. And then, like, 3 months later, the rules update had unsportsmanlike update, or an update to the unsportsmanlike clause, and unsportsmanlike minor. One of the new examples was interrupting a floor judge giving their initial ruling.
Thanks, AJ.
Yeah. So that's the AJ Sacher rule, if you ever look up the comprehensive rules. That one's on me.
I don't think we have enough time to go through all the James Gates stories, but that reminds me of one where he like, the floor judge comes over, and before the floor judge is out of his stride, like, you know, like
appeal.
He's just appeal, like judge, and it's just judge like in his hand. The judge walks over, and he's like appeal. It's like he just knew, like it was right when it was the day after they changed the sutured ghoul ruling with like Terravor and Tarmogoyf.
Yeah.
And James had already like I forget what it was, but he knew it wasn't going to work, and he had the paper with him. And it's the only reason why he won the judge ruling is because he had the fucking printout of the wizard site ruling on it.
Yeah.
And he had the clairvoyance to know, like, this will be wrong.
I've had a couple of those where like the floor judge or the head judge gives a ruling, and I'm like, can I appeal to the computer, because I know that that's not true anymore? And like half the time they go away and come back and change it, and half the time they're like, no, sorry. And then after the tournament, come up to me and they're like, sorry, blew it. Yeah. Okay. So the Dizani thing. So he like exploded kind of out of nowhere. And I remember a bunch of people that I trust around him being like, this guy is great. And I remember watching him play, and I was like, he's pretty damn good. And then after a while, stuff started like coming through the grapevine of like, there's some shadiness going on. And it was never like, oh, he, you know, got caught peeling extras or whatever. It was like the dealers thing. You remember that?
So which thing with the dealer?
It was like before Worlds, I think it was. He went around to all the dealers and asked what the other competitors had purchased from them.
Oh, sure, yeah, to get an advantage.
Yeah.
So this was like the Bill Belichick method.
Basically, yeah. And it's like, all right, like that's not technically legal, or that's not technically illegal. And if somebody told me that situation in isolation, I would say it's on the dealers for divulging information they shouldn't.
Well, but they don't really have anything. I mean, that's not something we want to be enforcing. You know, we don't want to have the.
Right.
You know,
well, that's what I'm saying. It's not technically illegal what he did, and if we're trying to say like what is wrong with this situation, I would say that like the deal, like if I knew that a dealer had done that, I would never buy from that company again. I just mean like a story like that, right? Where it's hard. It's even though it's like it leaves a bad taste in your mouth in regards to who Dizani is as a player and as a person. It's really hard. It's not the same as like, oh, that person got disqualified for lying to a judge. It's very different, right?
Yes.
But then that was like one of many of these types of stories coming out of like, well, there are some things of him on camera of like really poor sportsmanship and like disrespecting his opponents. And you're like, okay, again, that's not illegal, and that's not enough for me to like hate him, but it leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
What are we talking about? Like PTR? Are we talking like you know,
No,
Serrani, but like more aggressive.
it was like he was playing against John Stern and he loses.
The 3 is not a lot of life points, and this is a Sphinx's that's a lethal Rakdos return. And that Rakdos return gives John Stern 2 very decisive victories and is able to take this match away from Jeremy Dezani. Okay, so we're about to go look at Eric Froelich
And then, and that was like one of like 2 or 3 things where it was like, that's pretty gross. Like, that's like pretty gross, right? But again, it's not, he's not Mori, right? He's not Carvalho. He's not Mike Long, right? It's just like, I didn't like that.
I'm with you. There's certain players that, like, you know, you just know to keep an eye out for them. But what they're doing is not like enough dead wrong that they're not allowed to play anymore. But it's just one of those things, like, you can't like lower your guard against this guy because he'll like.
But again, it's not shadiness. It's not in-game shadiness. It's not stuff like, if I play this guy, I'm gonna have to watch out for him. It's like, I'm not as much of a fan of that guy as I was 10 seconds ago.
Right or wrong. I mean,
like, from watching him play and hearing about him from people close to him, I liked him and wanted him to win. Then I heard all this other stuff, and I started wanting him to lose. You know, that's the type of thing.
That's good context, because I wouldn't have thought that otherwise. So I'm glad you said that.
And then axed from the Pro Tour for lying to a judge, basically, right? The official ruling was misstating the game state to a judge, something like that.
Yeah. He was asked a question after he was asked a question already, and he gave a better answer for his side of the story.
Right. And when something like that happens, this is also at like 2 and 5 at the Pro Tour. He has literally nothing to play for except.
Yeah, well, and that means it's motivated by emotion and not desperation.
Right.
I actually don't know what the lie was, because to me,
Me neither. They didn't release basically any information on it. We have no clue.
See, because that's shady too. I feel like the nature of the lie to the judge is one of the most like sensitive, like, you know, Freedom of Information Act kind of stuff. Like, I want to know what you thought was a lie, because like Magic players, especially me, like, I can say things 2 ways that sounds like different things, but what I mean to do is explain it in a way that conveys the information more accurately.
And I know I've heard
analogy.
Right, and I've heard enough stories of people I know aren't cheating, like saying something wrong to a judge and getting bounced. That has happened enough times that somebody being DQ'd for lying to a judge isn't enough for me to say I know that person did wrong.
Sure.
Okay, so this Dezani thing happens, right? And when one DQ happens, when that DQ happens, it is no longer, okay, there's all these stories that are like through the grapevine and not that incriminating anyway, and third hand and blah, blah, blah. It's not that they all stay the same and now there's a DQ. It's like that DQ makes them all like a little more likely, right? A lot more believable. Like, it's not just one DQ's worth now. It's the like equity or whatever you want to call it of all those other things. So much easier to believe.
The rose tint is getting chipped away, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on that. I don't know. I can't really add any more.
Well, yeah, and I think I even spoke too much as it was. I just felt like, in general, it rang like it did for a lot of people when others have been banned. Like, you know, it wasn't like as obvious or outrageous as Bertaccini, for example, where like it was very clear that a lot of people were trying for a long time to get this exposed, and then it finally like was like brought to light in some regard in a way that like it was pretty hard to defend that this was even if it was mistakes, like, I mean, you gotta shore it up, man. I mean, you can't play like this. Even if that was the case, like, it's, you know, this is not something we can allow. If you're admitting that you play this sloppy, like, you see ya, you know.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel that bad, but it also felt like people were jumping on someone they didn't like. And I feel like that happened with Saito, for example. Like,
Yeah, I agree with that a lot.
like Saito, like people just didn't like him for whatever, like a bunch of different reasons. And then like, I think like his particular DQ got blown up to be more than just like, yeah, I messed up. And like, he like admitted it to himself and like he admitted it to everybody else and like, super sorry. But everybody else kind of like were like fervent wild dogs. And I just didn't like it. And I get that feeling with Dazani too, but I feel less of the empathy. I feel like a lot of people wanted Dazani DQ'd for like a long, long, long time.
I agree.
Like,
I don't think it was as vicious as it was with Saito. I think that, but I agree that it's very similar, very parallel.
Which makes me want to be at least one of the gravitational pulls that's outside the norm to make sure everything's right as rain. You know, right. I kind of want to be the guy that's like.
But he doesn't make it easy.
Let's just be sure because I know emotions are running hot here.
Right, but. I agree completely, and you want to be the, I was going to say devil's advocate, but I guess you're the like angel's advocate in this case, right? But
a conscientious objector.
Right, but he doesn't make it easy, right? When there's all these other things floating around, it's so hard to like be like, hey, let's all think about this. When it's like, it's probably not great.
Yeah, you never want to defend the guy who threw his dinner fork, you know?
Yeah.
Like the guy that's like, there is a difference between being like cheating is just, it's not that's better, worse, or anything else. It's just different than like rudeness. Like rudeness is pretty hard to get behind.
Right. Well, it's you never want to defend somebody that is guilty, that turns out to be guilty. Like this again, you were talking about Bertoncini. There was somebody who shall remain nameless that was very adamant that he was innocent and misunderstood for a very long time. And then more and more videos kept popping up, and he got axed, and then came back to the game and got axed again, and then came back to the game and got axed again. And it's like that person lost a ton of credibility. And a ton of, there's no way to save face from that, right? Like, you put yourself out there for what? To like defend your friend?
Yeah, and I'm like pretty like I'm still of the opinion that like he has a personality that does not work for Magic. Like he's not taking the responsibility of play to the level that you would need to do to play large tournaments. Like feel free to play Magic wherever you want, but like, we demand a certain bit of like, operational rigor that you're like refusing to adhere to, and it's not like an accident. That's what's clear to me is that cheating aside, which like I mean in certain cases I know the value is too much to resist. I call it passive cheating when you just like don't inform your opponent of something that's super good for you. It's like it's cheating, no doubt about it, but it's the one that like you can see anyone doing if they've like been in a place where they just if someone's weak.
Yeah, exactly. A moment of weakness is all it takes.
Which is not, not something that like necessarily holds up in a court of law, but it's something that at least pulls my emotional heartstrings.
Yeah, the human aspect of it is much more related.
I've been there and not succumbed enough times that I understand what it's like to be there in the first place.
Right.
So it's, I'm not. Yeah. Anyway, so what
not
I mean to
everybody
say
can
is
be Kenji Samura.
Absolutely. See, like those like aggressive cheats of like sleight of hand versus like, oh, I made a mistake, but I'm not going to correct it. Like that's still like not okay. We don't want you playing the game if you're going to do that. That's cheating. It's obviously cheating.
Right.
But like I think the combination of like the denial of it happening and the admission of sloppy play and the refusal to correct it was more offensive than the cheating to me. That it was like an admission of disregard for the game, like as if that was somehow better than cheating. He took the route of all you guys mean so little to me that I don't want to shape up. And that was like beyond forgiveness as far as the game was concerned, that I couldn't I couldn't like even like be the voice of reason at that point. I had to be like, well, you're right, we disagree on the reasons, but I can't disagree with your result.
So now what do you want to see from Dazani?
Geez, I don't know him well enough. I would want to see something different than what happened to like O'Greensey, for example. Like O'Greensey, when he did this thing that like you could have even played it off as an accident if you wanted to, but like he did this like denial piece, like kind of like the keyboard dojo guy did,
Well, that guy was a completely different deal.
Well, right, but it was clear that he was not in any way like
remorseful or
understanding
or.
And I feel like demanding remorsefulness is a bit like Kafkaesque or whatever. I don't know what the word is.
I agree with that.
It's a little bit weird to like say that not only do you have to be like sorry to admit it, but you have to mean it. I don't like that. But I also think that it's.
Well, that's what Burton Ching did. Like Burton Ching did the free roll apology, where he like posted something that could be interpreted as an apology without actually having to apologize.
Yeah, I've seen those before. I know. That really irked me. That got me on the. It takes a lot to be on the rough side of somebody who like is so eager to be like the person to borrow cards from. Like he would go up to people and like ask them if they need anything. Like it's just very difficult to like he was like pretty like generous in a lot of ways, but like it didn't matter because the refined nature of the tournament like escaped him. It's just not it's not his scene. It's not his tournaments just aren't for him.
Yeah.
But like. It was nice to be able to separate that. But that particular apology it was the connection of like his personal life and his other life that like made it really unsettling to read. It was very clear that
it made me like uneasy. Like
it read like he gave it to a lawyer. I know he didn't, but like it read like he was trying to craft a message to two people at the same time with different meanings, like a dog whistle.
Yeah.
And I was just not appreciating it, and that kind of made me like I think uneasy is the best way to put it. But more than that, like I no longer pushed back against people that were very hyper vigilantly.
Well, how do you feel about those public
trash?
Like, did you read Carvalho's?
I don't remember. I probably did, but I don't remember.
Well, he did one as well, and Reynad is another guy who did one.
Man, I have a feeling that Reynad and Bertine have a lot in common, but because I don't know Reynad, it just looks way worse.
No, they have a lot in common.
I just looks way worse from Reynad because I don't even know who he is, So it looks like what he did was so bad. It was basically like, you guys are all idiots for thinking I cheated. I didn't, but I don't care about you anyway. Anybody that thinks I would cheat isn't a part of my life. And I'm like, dude, who are you talking to?
Yeah, it read a lot like a petulant 15-year-old from like a 23-year-old man. Like it was very hard to read. But Carvalho, right? Carvalho is a known cheater that has been caught many times, and it's like he is one of the highest profile cheaters since the Wild West days of Magic.
Right.
And he made a public thing, and it was not convincing. It was more of, I didn't cheat, I don't cheat, I never cheat, and then a lot of like the completely like uncalled for aggression, where it's like you almost feel reading it like, I think methinks he doth protest too much. It's like you're pretty aggressively attacking the people accusing you of things instead of like really actually defending yourself.
I'm not trying to be a psychoanalyst. I'm not going to pretend like certain things mean guilty and certain things mean innocent. There's just a part of me that's very unmoved or unconvinced. So like I'm not prejudging, but I'm definitely like not going to judge differently based on what he said. Like it's not moving me towards like, oh, maybe these words mean that he didn't do it. Like it was so far removed. It was something like, I'm remembering what you say now. Like it was so far removed from what would be like an apology. It was so far removed from what would be, guys, I know that sometimes, magic can be difficult to understand. What I can tell you is that I didn't cheat. Whatever there is, like, it's hard to say. So like, obviously I'm not going to put myself above reality and objective evidence. So, that's, I'll just treat this like a hurricane hit my house. That'd be one thing.
there's two like very damning things to me. One is that like playing the victim almost, and the other is like straw man attacking your accusers.
Sure.
Like no, the DCI is wrong, or no, this judge is wrong, and it's like, well, like, do you have any reason to believe that they have something against you? Like, did you sleep with the guy's wife or something? Like, why would
and not just like they just felt like taking it out on me or someone else.
Right? Like, why do you feel
that,
special?
man.
Why do you feel singled out? You know?
I love it when people say like, "Oh, he was out to get me." I'm like, I don't know anyone who's out to get anybody. Like,
yeah, that's a very real thing of and this is something that my parents instilled in us. That's I've actually like talked to my older sister about this. Of like, we are very fortunate to have such wise parents that instilled this into us, which is you're so scared and like insecure, you know, in your like formative years, that you think all these people are thinking these bad things, and our parents would say, no, honey, they're not thinking those things about you. They're not thinking anything about you. They nothing you. Like, they're thinking about themselves, and they're thinking about how everything is affecting them. They don't care about you enough to think negative things about you.
And if they do care enough, it's very rare that it's like hyper negative. Usually, if they care about you, it's because they're trying to figure you out.
Right, and it's you know, so you say something stupid or whatever, and then you overanalyze it, and you like lose sleep. You're like, oh my god, I just embarrassed myself. It's like, no, they're not. They don't care. None of them care, and that relates a lot to this. Is like, why do you think that the whole world is against you? What evidence do you have that there's a conspiracy against you?
Yeah, well,
and I feel like a lot of these cheaters that make
what
these.
What more evidence do you need, AJ? I got, I'm innocent and I got caught and I got banned for cheating. What more evidence do you need that people are out to get me?
Exactly.
Obviously innocent.
Exactly. There's also the Nick Easel defense of like, how can I cheat? I have a girlfriend.
Oh, I love that one. That's my favorite.
Like, if I have a girlfriend and I cheated, what would she think of me?
Dude, I have
what?
I have a cousin who's bisexual. All right, I love gay people.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, you're really grasping here. All right, so we talked about the Dizani thing. What about the Palm 7 guy?
Well, I mean, I just...
There's nothing more to be said, right? Like, that's just insane.
Well, there's one thing to say, and is that, like, if he thought he can get away with what a 53-card deck felt like...
No,
all right,
that's my question is, I don't know the specifics of the cheat besides palming 7. Because...
Let's make up some facts so we can have a discussion.
Well, no, because as Sam Black posted, like... There's no way that it happens the way the internet thinks it happened, because almost 80% of the Pro Tour has played enough Magic to know the difference. Like, if I grab an unsleeved deck, I can tell you if it's 39 or 40.
Dude,
if I grab a
deck of bicycle playing cards, I'll like say like, this feels like 51. We should count this.
We've done that in front of each other before, playing
Yes.
Big 2 at tournaments. Like, I think like you grab a deck and shuffle it once, and you're like, "There's a Joker in here." Like
yeah.
And so Sam says this, like, if somebody and sleeves, it's a little different. I understand. Different sleeves have different feels. Sometimes you double sleeve, whatever. But that's the difference. Like, that maybe it's hard to tell, 59 and 61 from 60. 53, anybody that's played nearly enough Magic to make the Pro Tour will instantly know that 53 is not enough.
I think it's plausible that he thought he could get away with it. I also think it's very unreasonable, like, to assume that it happened exactly the way it assumes it happens. On the second thought, let's try thinking about it from maybe he is a victim side of it. Okay, let's just think about this.
What? That's not one side I was ready to argue.
I just thought about something, all right? Now,
all right.
I get that he's not smart enough to think of this defense, so it's clearly he's guilty. But if you would have said this, it would have put me for pause, okay? Imagine if you do the pile shuffle, exchange decks, draw 7, put it to the side, and your opponent just like calls a judge and says he had this 7-card hand to the side. It's like, well, no, I just drew it. You just cut my deck. And it's like, he's lying. Why would I call a judge if that didn't just happen?
Wow.
Right? So,
That's
Better
pretty
Call
good.
Saul. Next time,
That adds a lot of like depth to cheating and re-cheating. It reminds me of the drop kick.
oh, the dropkick
And
is
then-
the most
and then-
infamous. Like, people care about World War II and they try to learn lessons about history. The dropkick is probably the most like infamous like atrocity of still legal magic.
It's insane. But when drop kicking was at its most popular, most like common, and it finally like judges finally knew about it and stuff, when you sat against a cheater, you could drop a card on the ground, present, and then accuse them of drop kicking you.
Oh God, you've heard the Sperling story?
Yes, but tell the audience.
Basically, Sperling was at like the finals of a PTQ. So it was like wildly relevant. Maybe it was like top 8 or something. And like Sperling, if you don't know Sperling very well, he's the kind of person that doesn't show up to PTQs and then shows up and wins like with like 80%. And it's basically Sperling is the person I've seen with the largest win rate against pretty good players. Like his win rate against like very professional, great players is not perfect because most of his game comes from just mind fucking people, not like nonstop, and that's just not possible with like you can't Jedi mind trick certain people basically. And I looked at the Sperling for like a large part of my life because it was like really easy to see like this person that's like like 4 years older. I'm like 16, and I'm just seeing him like walk circles around people.
Yeah,
and I'm
play a completely different game. Yeah.
I can't believe it. And when he did this, it like drove me crazy because as a kid, it all of the pieces of it added up. It was the sheriff piece. It was the like gotcha piece. It was the prevent yourself from losing to a cheater cheat. Like, oh man, it was all the rolled in one. Basically, what happened was his opponent had shuffled his Sperling's deck. Sorry, they shuffle their own decks and they present. The person shuffles Sperling's deck, then pile shuffles it, and then Snap calls a judge for 39 cards. I think it was Onslaught Limited. 39 cards. And then Sperling just waits casually until the judge shows up and waits for the person to tell his side of the story completely. Doesn't say a word. Not one word. And then as soon as the judge goes to his side, it's like, Matt just says one like sentence. He's like, look under his foot.
Yep. Check the shoe.
Look under his foot. That's all he said. And the guys, not only the look in his face, but usually you have time to, like, if your opponent, like, if you can tell if your opponent knows the jig's up and you can kick the card back.
Yeah.
Like, you can, like, figure out what's going on, basically.
Yeah.
And so, like, effectively, instead of drop kicking, he put it under his foot as a countermeasure against the drop kick.
Getting
It was
re-kicked. Yeah.
It was an upgraded drop kick,
Yeah.
which was like
The next level drop kick.
Yeah, I'm gonna have this card at the bottom of my foot for the next 2 hours, basically.
Yeah.
This is like next level drop kick. This is the one that's supposed to work. This is back when people that listen to this podcast that may think like this is crazy. Like, how could people be cheating this much? They're not cheating this much right now. I can tell you that.
No, this was like 10 years ago.
This is like literal like there were no rules, and half the people kind of appreciated the good cheat. It was a weird place.
Yeah, it was a very different time.
Magic was a weird place where, like, if you told a story about cheating at dinner, you'd probably get an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was strange times, and people used to make fun of each other and like berate each other in ways that would not be acceptable when it was in a card store these days.
Yeah, very different time.
Anyway, but so Sperling did that and then won the PTQ, and it was just like it was as if, I don't know how to put it, like it was so stoic that like I still remember it to this day.
Oh yeah, it's icy. I mean, it's like you have to have just ice water in your veins to pull that off.
It was so like it wasn't even like he was sure it would work. It was just like very clear he had one thing to do. Like it wasn't like confidence. It was just it was just certainty of like,
he just knew his line.
I know exactly what's going on right now.
Yeah. I pulled up, we already talked about Desani, but I wanted to pull up the official announcement. It says, Jeremy Desani has been disqualified for Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir for misrepresenting the game state to judges. The incident occurred in round 8 when judges were called to his table by the players in the match. After an investigation, it became clear that Desani had modified his version of the story while discussing the incident with judges. As a result, Desani has been disqualified from the event. So yeah, pretty much what we said. And then I also pulled up the other one, which was from Stephen Speck. And before I say it, I want to say that it was really, really funny when this first broke. Somebody tweeted about it, like Martel or somebody tweeted about it, and instantly everybody went back through the guy's like Facebook and Twitter because he had crushed some like modern tournaments, some like opens or 5Ks or whatever, tweeting like the whole time like, this deck is unbeatable, like I'm gonna get these cards banned, with Amulet Bloom, turn 1 and turn 2 killing everybody along the way.
Sure.
So those all started cropping up really hilariously as this was breaking live. But the official statement from the coverage is, yesterday Steven Speck was disqualified from Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir for manipulation of game materials. That's the name of the rule. Manipulation of game materials.
I do that every game.
Yeah. Now, when you say manipulate, an opponent noticed Speck suspiciously handling his deck during a match and called a judge. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Speck had presented only 53 cards and had a plausible opening hand set to the side. As a result, Speck was disqualified from the tournament. Now, when you say plausible opening hand, does that mean like 3 land and a good curve or something? Or does that mean, you know...
And what's weird about that is that I find it hard to see how it matters. Like, if he has a 7-land hand off to the side, I can't imagine where that's fine.
I think it's just that if it was literally 7 lands or 7 spells, it's very easy to say he dropped 7 cards or whatever. Like game loss for presenting an illegal deck.
A single Hornet Queen got someone banned or whatever, right? Like, I mean,
that's very different though.
Well, different in that like it's, a card you would need, but 7 cards missing. Again, it has to go through 2 people's hands.
That's the detail of this that I wanted to look up, because I remember, because as Sam Black said, like, it's very strange that he would be able to present 53 and get away with it for any amount of time.
Sure.
Right? That should never work.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen in a modern tournament for 9 rounds, I'll tell you that.
Exactly. So, and this guy's clearly not like picking his spots like this is a regular thing. So how do you pull this off? First of all, this is clearly very heavily premeditated, right? There's no way that this is opportunistic in any regard. How do you get away with 53? That's the part of this that blows my mind. How do you get away with 53 and then transition to having 60? Because surely you have to have 60, not 67. Especially...
I think I might have an answer for you.
All right.
So you get your 60-card deck back. You're right that it can't be 53. That's just not right. I mean, it's just not a thing that happens.
It can't be 53 and it can't be 67.
So if you see this deck right here, right?
Yeah.
If it's handed back to me, I can pull off 7 off the bottom. Those are random 7, right? Those are random 7 cards. They're not going to be necessarily set up already, right?
Right.
But you have to make sure you get 7 because you can't. It's not like you can draw a 7th card if you get 6, and 8 you maybe get away with. But basically, you just look at it, and if it's a good hand, you run the cheat. If it's a bad hand, you just draw 7.
So you free roll a mulligan.
You're free rolling it. You get a free mulligan, yeah.
Well, that would explain why it says plausible opening hand instead of nut opening hand. Because that would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, basically he gets 2 chances at life. He gets a serum pattern, literally.
Okay, see, now, this was something...
I work in fraud. I'm paid to think like this.
No, I mean, because my frame of reference for this type of cheat was my first Pro Tour Berlin 2008, Pro Tour Elves. There was a player that was disqualified, and hilariously, subsequently, made a public statement. Yeah, I cheated. I've been cheating for a month.
You guys are all idiots.
He said, I was going to quit Magic, so I was just free rolling this tournament to, like, if I just get away with it and make a big finish, then awesome. And if not, I'm never playing again anyway. Literally, he said this. But the cheat he was running was he had a nut 6 in his lap.
Oh, and he mulligans, and that's easier. Okay.
And then would mulligan into it. Just want to touch on the Chapin thing.
If there's one thing I know about Chapin, it's that he wants the best result that isn't anywhere near illegal. Like
Yes.
so it's not about like right and wrong necessarily. He wants to follow the letter of the law, and he also wants to win, but he's more eager to make sure that the rules are followed to the letter. But in that comes this like idea of pushback and making sure that the letter of the law is where the judges say it is.
Yeah. Which
And
I think is a lot of what if you listen to his side of the conversation, half of it is trying to, explain his case and whatever. But the other half, especially the latter half, is very much him asking for specifications about like the exact rules that are being enacted and the wordings on those, and he was very much trying to learn from what was going on.
and I can also see how it's very easy to interpret how that could appear like not only like a sore loser, but like just kind of like someone trying to like just get like wiggle out.
Yeah.
By knowing the judges, and just as and like it can also be viewed as like not taking it with class. Like there was an analogy to LSV, how LSV got like something similar, even though I don't know if it was exactly the same, where maybe he drew an extra card off glimpse or something, and like LSV was just like, oh yeah, I got a game loss, well that's that, and like that's like not many people are willing or able or capable of having that composure, even if it was right to do so.
Yeah.
And I think that not to say that that's anything to
And
say
trying
about
to compare
Chapin.
those is such apples and oranges anyway.
I just don't think that we should be expecting that as a rubric for what's like default.
Yeah, I agree.
In addition, it's not even clear that what LSB did was even appropriate. He might have just wanted to get out of the situation and thought, well, it's not the worst of all the results. And in a general sense, I think that pushing back against judges should be acceptable behavior for when you're going to get a game loss for something that is, in essence, advantage neutral. Like it's a technical thing that we can absolutely see the benefits of holding it to very literal account.
It is
because, but however, it's also clear that pushback is expected and appropriate when it's advantage neutral, because it's kind of hard to really stomach it. Now, whether or not it's right, it's hard to stomach.
It's very dangerous, and I believe counterproductive to demonize discourse in these types of situations. I think that it is very, very dangerous to demonize arguing your case, explaining your side, and trying to achieve justice in the way that you see it. I think that saying that he acted incorrectly or poorly is outrageous for people to say, and I think that is a lot of that should just like go away, because it was very temporary and it's the internet. But I think that for the more astute and involved people, the type of person that would seek out this podcast, those people should be on a higher level of thinking than an internet troll saying, he's a piece of shit or whatever.
And I'll add to that there's a nature of things where if how rude someone is or how abrasive someone is really doesn't have anything to do with whether or not they cheated or not. Now, it colors it, and it's hard to ignore that. But I think it's important to at least admit and mention that those are just not the same issues at all.
Yeah, I mean,
a good example is like when I was talking about Desani, and I said how he's rude, it didn't help him out, right? Now, that was pragmatically true, and I think that it's important to note that it would be nice if it wasn't that way, because it doesn't seem like something that's relevant to cheating. However, pretty hard to ignore. And I think that's true for Chapin too, because the way that he interacts is a lot like people in the past, like Mike Long and Zvi Mauschwitz, and like there's a few others that like had this idea in their head about technical language that they thought was just like, as long as I say it slowly and I articulate my point and I'm reasonably polite and calm, there's no downside to talking about this. And I don't think that's true. Whether it ought to be true is another thing entirely.
But I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. Like, it's not a bad thing.
But it is perceived negatively. And so what I guess I want to say is that I understand people's approach to this problem that they may not have had if Chapin was just like, yeah, all right, I
And
guess.
it's also like these people making these judgments have never been on a major stage receiving a game loss in a one game. Like that game was won. If like, it was a draw at worst, but it looked very advantaged for him. And like at a pro tour at X and O, like on camera, like there's so much, nobody has been in that situation, and for them to pass judgment is silly.
Yeah, especially when it's like, well, luckily, I've seen some people say like, well, luckily I wasn't there because I can be impartial about the law now, and it's like, what is the law for? Like,
Yeah.
like an equitable arrangement should be the goal of the law, and the law's language should be the method by which equity is reached.
Right.
Now, how objective the law should be should be determined on how often it is being abused. For example, in most countries, laws originate as a shield and they end up being a sword. Like laws are used to jail people instead of to fix a problem.
Yeah.
And that's not, we don't have that in Magic right now. We don't use the law to get people banned. Really, it's the opposite. Really, we have rules to protect people from being cheated.
Yeah,
But it's not to really punish people aggressively. It ends up happening, but it's not really designed to over prosecute people.
But
I don't think anybody would admit that. I don't think anybody would say that we over prosecute people in Magic.
No, but I do think that we are heading more and more in that direction as we try to create more uniformed decisions.
Yes.
Like if
we desire objectivity, it's a bad thing.
It's not necessarily the most healthy. And I tweeted at the time, or at least when I saw the replay the next day, I strongly believe in my heart of hearts that the point of the rules and subsequently their enforcement should be the goal of which should be to protect the integrity of the game. And I also strongly believe that in that case, with all of those facts known and everything that happened, the rule and how it was enforced negatively impacted it actively hurt the integrity of that game of Magic the Gathering.
I would be just as upset if it was a random person in a feature match. But
Yes.
I would actively ignore if I heard about this happening when it was sitting at table 147. Now, whether or not that's right or wrong is what it is. But if this happened and I heard about it at table 147, I wouldn't think anything of it. But if I saw it on TV and it was a random person, I would feel like he got wronged.
I would feel exactly as against it as I did with Patrick. I would feel against it if it was somebody I didn't like and they got this ruling. I think that it was that bad.
And part of me would be like, dude, I want him to get caught for something that he actually did wrong. Like I don't want him to get caught for something that he did on accident. Like that's not.
Exactly.
I don't want this image. I want people to see him for what he is.
I don't want him to be a martyr. I want this guy to.
But I've actually a very interesting point on this because this exact same thing happened to me in the feature match area, not on camera, at the Invitational in Charlotte, and I did not get a game loss. It was downgraded. And it was the exact same thing.
The head judge's discretion to downgrade such things.
Right. Well, and my opponent. Reasonably so. I was playing the Artifice Intuition deck, which is like really like a deck that like has me in a place where I couldn't just play Magic. I had to like do a lot of things that like I had to think like to make sure I'm doing things properly. And as soon as I started going on autopilot, I just made a mistake. And the mistake was to put the artifact in my hand without revealing it. Now, as soon as he said like, "Oh, Judge, you just put it right in his hand," I just like slammed down my hand just like Chapin did and said, "I have all 0 cast cost artifacts."
Yeah, so, it's literally impossible for me to have cheated here.
Right. And then he still was like, that's not okay. And he had a point. Again, I didn't mind him calling a judge. It's clear that I shouldn't be sloppy. And then like Cedric was there, like he didn't cheat. You can see he didn't cheat, right? And then another person, the judge came over and talked it over. And then afterwards, he's like, well, it's a game loss. But since we know that there's no advantage here and we can show that there's no advantage here, we've decided to downgrade it. And so what I'm saying is there's precedent for a downgrade on a non-camera match.
No, it's completely up to the head judge's discretion. But the head judge in this case felt that it was in the best interest of the integrity of the game to enforce the letter of the law rather than look at the situation for what it was as like a thinking human being and realize how silly the whole thing was, and actually do the thing that would let the game of Magic the Gathering finish in natural Magic the Gathering terms.
Yeah, like if the desire is to have us be in a place where there's rules and if you break them, that's there. If it's black and white, you know, accept your punishment. Like, why are you even arguing about it?
Yeah,
like,
but that is not the case.
That kind of game is not one that I'm interested in. And the
Yeah.
reason why is because I think we can have a competitive game that doesn't require that wheelchair of law. I think
Do
we
you
can have
know?
a very dynamic law set. I don't want to have our Jedi Council turn into the Galactic Senate.
Yeah, do you know who the most hated person at any local store is? It's the rules lawyer, prison rules guy. Everybody hates that guy. And yet, they're trying to make the game into that? Like, it just makes no sense.
Well, to them, they feel like, in general, and I, being from this place, I can speak from this because I used to rules lawyer aggressively. It's a dual feeling of, haha, I got you, and I'm doing this for the greater good, not like actively, but like passively. I know that at least I'm not doing the wrong thing.
Right, which is, again, I think that is actively attacking and diminishing the integrity of the game rather than improving it.
I don't blame people for not seeing it. It's a very complicated issue. So when people say, like, I want the black and white law, it's like, I can't blame you for that.
Right,
like,
right. I agree for Joe Schmo. But for level 5 judge Ricardo Tessitore, he should be able to, like, if you are a level 5 at a pro tour with a feature match where everything is clear in front of you with one of the most anti-cheating people in the game, and it's on camera and recorded, like, if all of these factors go into it, and that is when you decide you can't downgrade, when can you? Never, right? If that's the precedent, you can never nobody can ever downgrade. If he couldn't in that situation, nobody should ever downgrade anything.
Well, and there's a lot of Reddit threads that are talking about downgrades in general, where it's like it's almost as if they thought that downgrades weren't even possible. Like it seems like they're thinking like, well, of course it's black and white. There's no other option. It's like, well, no, there's literally like an expectation of reasonable subjective downgrade.
It is at the discretion of the head judge, and you see downgrade. I've received downgrades. I've had opponents receive downgrades in similar situations, and I've also been in situations where like something is stupid like that, and I haven't been downgraded. At Cardmageddon, the big flop Vegas tournament, which is another subject that I should talk about at some point because it's pretty funny. But I was playing with Corsair IRL for the first time in a long time, and I had been playing online. And I just messed up my mechanics with it and, like, put a card in my hand instead of flipping it over or something like that. And sure enough, I got Gameloss. You know, it was like the Chapin thing. Like, I had my hand down and I put the card on top, hadn't touched it. And if you looked at the card and the way that, like, the first 5 turns had played out, if I had had that card in my hand, I would have cast it last turn. And the judges were like, we can't use that information. We can't downgrade it. Clearly you could, but I understand you not wanting to.
See, and I think that's like a training issue. Like, you're trained with two conflicting ideologies. One is don't use any information that could subjectively determine like how to rule, and this would include like, yeah, but the counterspell wasn't even good there, right? Like if you drew an extra card but it was a counterspell and you're going to lose anyway, that shouldn't be part of your ruling. I mean, that's what they teach that in some regard. And on the other side of the fence, they teach the other regard, where it's like use the information to figure out if the intent was there.
Right.
And I think that those are conflated.
And protect the integrity of the game thing.
Just like every system of law, like it comes down on angle shooting so hard that what it ends up doing is having the rules that are in place to dissuade angle shooters coming on too aggressively towards people that just have nothing to do with the whole thing. Also, it's complicated, so that it's hard to understand, even if you did want to get involved with it. And it has the added benefit of having the rules be more granular, such that people that are angle shooters can angle shoot better.
Use them as a tool instead of it being something
shield,
to
sword, like they can use it instead. I know that because I it's very easy to know like where I could have won, but I just like don't play that way anymore. Like one example is this. This one is so funny to me because it was it was like I was a different person. Like, I don't know. I feel like this is like my automatic reaction is different than what my automatic reaction would be in the past, such that like I felt like I was like, it was like out of my body. It was really weird. So like I'm in a match and I want to block with Mutable or Vicious Factory or Mutable, I think it was.
Okay.
And I activate Mutable. He activates Jitty, gives it -1. Then activates Jitty again, give it -1. And I know that there was a period in time where you could just activate it again and become a 2/2. And then it would become a 1/1 again, and then you could activate it again and be a 2/2, and then you could attack.
But that is not how it
It's no
works.
longer the case, but I knew that it was the case, and I knew that there's the rules, sometimes they change every year.
It's
So I
very
think
easy to
it's
get
like-
a free roll cheat there.
Well, I called a judge, and the judge ruled in my favor. And what I did was I was like, I have to appeal this. I mean, I was grasping at straws, but like, quite frankly, I can't believe that ruling. I'm going to appeal.
Yeah,
Like,
I was just double checking, but now I'm going to triple check.
Basically, I just want to make sure it's not possible. But like the fact that you just said yes so quickly means that you don't know the context of what I'm asking exactly, because it used to be legal.
Yeah.
So my opponent, of course, has no idea about any of this. Like he was ready to accept the yes on that because the judge said so, and like I did it. So like it's obvious that I'm not just doing it for no reason. And of course, that judge comes over and says, "Yeah, the way it works doesn't work that way." I'm like, I knew it, right? And of course, it was the literal win versus lose. And it was just like it was weird because it didn't feel it was hard to feel anything from it, but it felt so foreign, and that was the scary part.
You weren't used to you basically willfully lost.
Well, yeah, I took what was reality, and I imprinted it on this particular situation.
Right.
And it was not for reasons of pragmatism or competition,
Yeah.
And it was very. And again, I just didn't quite. Anyway, so the reason I bring that up is because it felt so weird to me. I understand that those situations occur a lot of times where it doesn't feel weird because they don't think there's anything wrong with doing what it is that I didn't do. And there really isn't any. I mean, it's hard to really blame somebody for asking a question and taking the judge's word for it. I mean, unless you happen to know more than the judge and you know that.
Right.
But talk about proving intent, right?
Yeah.
Like, I called a judge on myself here, And, but at the same time, it's like, I have to be able to understand cheaters in some way if I couldn't even sit well with the idea that I just did that to myself when it was obviously the only quote-unquote choice that anybody that's reasonable would make on any internet forum. Like internet forums all across the board, like, of course you call yourself out on that. Of course you don't cheat like that. And it's like, dude, I don't know, man. That is a hard, that feels not automatic.
So this Chapin thing, right? It's pretty bad, and the backlash was even worse.
I don't dislike the ruling. To be clear on that, like I don't.
I don't hate it. I just if you can't downgrade there, when can you?
I mean,
that's all I can say about it.
They rewound 2 turns for Finkel and Kibler. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's so easy and so clear and repairable, and whatever.
I think that we should view the camera as a benefit to both players and still equal. Like, I think it's just very strange to think that if you're under camera, you have to play the same rules when you're off camera, when it's clear that there's a lot of benefits to be had by having additional information to make rulings on things that we wouldn't have normally. I think the fact that we don't have that information normally is a negative that we don't need to impose on the feature match area.
I don't think that every time there's one of those things you have to go to a camera, but in that case it's so easy to do. This is not, and it's obviously important, right? The judge ruling lasted 10 minutes. I
agree with Cedric that should have been on camera at least.
Well, I was going to get to that in a second, so hold off. But it's not like you're saving time by not going to the tape, right? You're not. And again, it has nothing to do with integrity of the game or of the tournament. You're actively hurting it, if anything. But before I go into that, I will say Evan Irwin posted a video right after it happened with his thoughts.
Saw that.
And it has, he's obviously pretty emotional and whatever. So and isn't necessarily the most eloquent on some of his points, but he definitely makes a lot of very good points, and definitely check that out if you're interested in such things.
Like it was interesting in that, like, it was clear that it appealed to emotion that could be ignored and the points would still be valid. So like, some of the points he made weren't grounded in like something that was convincing to the logical sense of being or to the rational behavior of judges. It was just like a whatever,
Which is why, if I thought that it was like, bad or whatever, I wouldn't have brought it up. I wouldn't recommend you all to go watch it. I definitely think you should. So the other thing is, which I tweeted at the time, the coverage, holy smokes. I always have so much negative to say about WotC coverage. I think that they do not do a good job. Or at least not nearly as good of a job as they should. I'm highly critical of them, but not without reason. But this is massive. This is such a dropping of the ball. The fact that they left the cameras on is insane. And there's Star City cuts to the booth like that. And they are so good about it. Like, judges called and it isn't sorted out immediately. You're back looking at Cedric and Patrick. And that's the way it should be, and there's a reason it's like that. The fact that the directors left the cameras on the coverage is a huge mistake. Number 2, they left the mics hot. Insane. You should not be hearing what the players are saying in those situations or what the judges are saying. It is not our place as an audience to be privy to that information. The mics are not there for those situations. The mics are there for fun banter. Yeah.
If he expected privacy...
If I was Patrick Chapin and I found out that the mic was hot and the camera stayed on me, I would be upset.
Without question. Now we're in agreement. I think that if the understanding is that this stuff is recorded, then there wouldn't be a problem. I think that...
There's no precedent. This is the first time that something like this has really happened.
Which is why there's a disconnect between our two positions. I think that your default is that it should be obvious that it's not recorded. My default is that I don't have a default.
I've been on camera at Star City and at GB's so many times, and there is anything that would make me as a player, when I get feature matched, asked to not be on camera is bad for the game of Magic the Gathering. If Patrick Chapin at a Pro Tour got announced for a feature match and said, "No, I'd rather play off camera,"
I guess I just don't get it. Hold on a second. So I guess I just don't understand.
For a lot of people, Patrick Chapin is somebody whose brand is worth enough that being on camera is worth any potential downsides. Somebody that doesn't have a very valuable brand has no reason to be on camera.
I have absolutely no interest in protecting people's brands. I mean, he could just take the Gameloss if his brand is worth so much to him. I think brands are not something that Magic is interested in considering.
That's really, really short-sighted and naive.
I'm also anti-capitalistic and I hate money, so I think that comes from that.
It doesn't matter. It is in WotC's best interest to have major brands. Do you think Brian Kibler being Brian Kibler is good for Magic, neutral for Magic, or bad for Magic? If you
Our
say
conversation
anything,
is now coming up with what's best.
Extremely good, then you're an idiot.
We're coming up with situations that are bad for Magic's bottom line as part of our conversation. I just think that we're way far off the mark here. I think it's more to do with what's appropriate.
I would argue that it was inappropriate also, on top of everything else that I'm saying.
Well, that stuff we can disagree on from an ideological, economic. We just have a difference of opinion about what money is. But if we step back and just go to what's appropriate, I agree with you. If it's obvious to Chapin, which you could say it was, and let's assume it is obvious to him that it would not be recorded, I think that's very strange and it should not have happened, and that's not okay.
Okay.
However, I do not think that things should be made to be just totally we're not going to record, during certain moments. I don't know, that just seems like I just don't get it. And also if it prevents somebody.
It's not the job of the coverage to make sure everything is on the up and up. It's
also not the job to
That is so far and away irrelevant to what coverage is and what they're doing.
Frankly, if we didn't have this conversation, I wouldn't know what the problem was. I understand your position now, but it's hard to grasp who's hurt by this aside from what you said the brand was. But I'm not considering that in this conversation. I'm considering
Well, the other victim is the audience.
The
I
audience
think that it was
yes.
a worse, that coverage, that block of that rounds, that hour of coverage was a significantly worse product for having the mics stay hot and the cameras stay on the match. Significantly worse. And I think every time that Star City cuts back to Cedric and Sullivan, it is a much better product than if they stayed on, which was a massive dropping of the ball of the directors.
So this is coming from a place of like pragmatism. I feel like you're speaking from pragmatism, which is probably appropriate. Like it's pretty obvious that when you have situations like this and you do things that are totally within your right and really should be like expected of someone that's getting a game loss for this kind of thing to push back a little bit, and when that gives a negative reaction like it's getting now, me and you, I think, are pretty clearly like this is not an appropriate reaction. It should not be this negative, and the fact that it's negative is bad for everybody. But then to take that back to the root source and make that the evil in this doesn't connect to me.
I think the dropping of the ball of the coverage is both irrelevant to the actual issue of the judge ruling and blah blah blah, and also a far worse sin.
I don't disagree with you there. I think that it is a far worse thing, but I think that both things are pretty nominal.
And we haven't even gotten to the casters. This is just the fault of the directors for not cutting away. Now you said you didn't actually watch it, so you didn't hear the casters. But
I'm assuming you don't mean the magic spellcasters.
I do not. I mean the commentating team of Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
Specifically, one Hall of Fame Randy Buehler, repeatedly, and Cedric talked about this a lot in his all caps tweet rant while this was happening.
I saw this.
Which is also featured on Evan Irwin's video. So if you don't want to dig through Cedric's Twitter feed, you can go watch Evan's video, which you should do anyway, and it has all his tweets there. But I tweeted about this as well. Randy continuously throughout was insinuating that what Patrick was doing was wrong and was somehow skirting the line of legality.
Now I'm on board with you. That's fucking
regularly referenced that Chapin came up in the Wild West of the mid-90s where cheating was rampant, which is not something you should be bringing up like willfully, and was insinuating that Chapin comes from a school of thought that you can coerce judges into making incorrect decisions, and that was what Patrick was trying to do.
Well, he's projecting what he used to do, I imagine, which is what everybody used to do because it was the Wild West. However,
exactly.
Projection has no basis in reality. It's demeaning judges to say that they're corruptible, which is just, flagrantly. It's pretty much not true. Like as far as like
to his credit, in regard to that point, he did say like this isn't going to work on Ricardo. To his credit there.
But however, it just says like, hey, look, like be careful around these judges. They're all corrupt fucks. I'm with you now. I see now why you're upset. And
it wasn't just like one offhand comment. He, throughout the 10-minute debacle, he reiterated it 3 or 4 times that this was Patrick doing something or attempting to do something shady and wrong. That is a projection from a past point in Magic history, and said it multiple times, and it's
the only one projecting is him.
It was so offensive to listen to, and it's so unprofessional of him to do in that capacity, and so misguided to try and place that onto Patrick Chapin of all people. It's so. Oh,
it's just gracious.
It hurt my heart. It hurt my heart and it hurt my brain.
Well, I wish I would have had this context. Well, actually, I'm glad we didn't because we got to have the conversation without this, which I think I don't know. I got a lot out of that, and I think that there's more to consider in that conversation just on its own. I think reasonable people can disagree about the nature of like transparency in that regard. I think.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Given what's going on with Randy here, I mean, that's like saying that people don't deserve defense attorneys if they're charged for a crime or something. I mean, it's just wild.
It's really really bad and so unprofessionally done.
That's
And
fine. That is not acceptable.
that was by far the most offensive part to me. Again,
That's like slanderous.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
like making fun of one person and
Exactly. It's so unprofessional and offensive. And while I do think that it's completely on the directors for not cutting away, the fact that Randy said that stuff is really, really over the line.
the judge could have cut it off anytime he wanted to, and he didn't, which was unprofessional in that regard. In that, like,
Yeah.
he probably should have been like, "Look, like, I'm making my ruling. Like, you're nothing you're going to say here."
Which he did,
that's-
and the conversation shifted to Patrick trying to understand better what was going on.
Oh
And-
God, I've heard Patrick do this before, and now I understand why people are mad at him too. Because Patrick has this way of saying something that he assumes is very like, nice, but it comes across super douchey, and that's like, hold on, I just want to understand what you mean by this. But like, I've heard him say that before, and it sounded like
Right. But it was
I know he doesn't
genuinely
mean that, but
like
it
this
does
was
sound
a fucked
bad.
up thing that was happening to him, and he was
Sounds
trying to
like-
understand why it was happening to him. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right, but I've been in a room where he's done that, and it sounded slimy to me at the time.
Sure, but that's
So, what I'm
and
saying
it's
is I
so
understand.
not Randy's place to say anything like that.
Without question. I also
Now-
happen to know that that's not.
You should go back and listen to it for exactly this, if nothing else. And then, so I tweeted about that, and a couple other people did, including Cedric. And the next day, on video, they did, in one of their like cutaways between rounds, they cut to Hagon alone in the booth, and he did apologize, basically, on behalf of the coverage team, saying, we did not handle this well. The people expect more of us. We expect more of us. That was wrong. We should have done better, and we will do better, and we're sorry.
Hagon's a real class act.
And yeah, 100% A plus for them doing that segment. They had no need to do that. It was a day later. They easily could have pretended it never happened. So good on them for doing that. And also, as somebody joked to me on Twitter when I tweeted, like, good on them for doing this, British people are really good at apologizing. Is that a stereotype we can all, like, just be like, yeah, that's pretty true?
They also have like the best meaningless dry comedy I've ever heard.
Yeah. It's good.
If you've seen Monty Python skits, not the movies, the skits,
Yeah.
they are phenomenal in the audacious nature. It could easily not be funny, but they just went for
But
it.
they will just throw it out there and just let it
Yeah,
sit.
like and if you laugh, you don't laugh. Couldn't care less. I'm just saying words.
I've
and
been
I know they're
watching
funny.
I've been watching a bunch of Peter Sellers movies, and he does a lot of that just like flat, dry delivery, and then fucking just let it and his timing, oh my god.
Watch all of Faulty Towers. Thank me later.
I started it years ago and was like, I have to watch all this, and then never got around to it. So I will revisit that. But
Every episode feels like it's a movie. I don't know. Like, I mean, it's not obviously, but it feels like it's like a Pink Panther movie in 30 minutes.
it's Fawlty Towers is Cleese, right? John Cleese?
He's the best too.
Yeah.
He puts up with so much. He has this like way of like he has like everybody's like giving him shit all the time, and he's just like, all right, that's
yeah. So anyway, so it was very cool of them to do that, and very cool of Rich to very much take it on. It was not like, hey, we did this thing kind of messed up. He was like very genuine about it. The only thing that I would say that was like didn't leave the greatest taste in my mouth about the whole thing is like the directors, somewhat, and clearly Randy were the ones at fault for this, and Rich was the one that was like, hey, sorry guys. So like, I don't know.
I was gonna say something about that, and I share your sentiment that like it doesn't feel right that the person apologizing is the defense lawyer. You know, when it happens.
Yeah. Again, but like, what can you do? Can you have Randy come out and like grovel? No, clearly that's like just as unprofessional as saying these terrible things. So like, I understand.
I
wish that there was a better way for that to happen, but I understand why.
What I would have done is had Randy just send out a tweet around the same time.
Yes.
That echoed the sentiment.
100%, which they didn't do, and that's it. Once I sent that tweet, and like I got in a couple conversations with some people about it, and blah blah blah, and so I was like interacting with people on Twitter after that happened with the fallout and the response, public response, and I went to Randy's Twitter to say like, did he say anything after I said like, hey, kind of in one of those conversations, I was like, kind of LOL at Rich apologizing for Randy and the director's fuck ups. And I was like, hey, I wonder if Randy did, and he did not say anything. So, but that's like something like that. If something like that happened to like an up and coming caster of like college sports or whatever, like they would be fired. Like that, it was that offensive.
And boom goes the dynamite.
Yeah, but whatever.
You know, but when it comes to that kind of stuff, I think that everybody gets one, and I say that because it is very difficult to do casting and make zero terrible mistakes without having friends tell you what's going on.
I would agree with that. And again, this is one of those things that's Randy never should have been put in that situation to make that mistake because the director should have cut away. It's the same thing as Ben S's controversy about making some, borderline racist jokes or whatever. He should never have been in that situation because those mics should not have been hot. That was on the directors, again. But since he said the thing and since the mics were hot, he then had to apologize, which he did, and it's all fine. And again, everybody gets one. And he should totally be allowed to cast some more and everything. And I don't think people are like mad at him anymore. But he never should have been put in that situation. It's the same thing with Randy. So it's hard. Whatever. I'm not saying that Randy should be fired or whatever or should have to grovel. I feel like he should not have been in that situation in the first place. But the fact that he was and did that is not good. That's all.
Well, he made one hell of a mono blue deck for a world tournament, so.
Well, I, as much as he gets shit on by the internet, as everybody does. There are some like when he first came back, I was like, I don't know about this, and I genuinely liked a lot of his casting, and I still like a lot of the things that he does, and but. This one was just, it was really bad. I think
what Bueller adds to the cast is a lot like what Martell adds, in that like you and I say this in a specific way, like he gets really close to abrasive or like really close to like on the line and doesn't cross it when he knows where the line is. Like
right.
When you know what the line is, he's really good at getting to the place where it's interesting and also totally okay.
Yeah.
However, this didn't really have a line to work with.
No.
No. Here's what I'm saying about this, okay? I'm not saying there wasn't a line. I'm saying he didn't see one. He just, like, lost...
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that
he lost his composure. He had a drunken... He had a Mel Gibson rant, whatever,
It's not even that bad. Like,
I'm saying it's so devoid from his character, like, that it's, like, weird that it happened.
I don't think he thought there was anything wrong with it for a round and a half until he checked Twitter.
Which is why it was a problem, which is why it's important that he admit it and come, that's the important thing is that it's like, hey, look, like I was so far removed that I didn't even know this is a problem. I'm so aware that it is. I feel bad that I didn't know this. Wow. Yeah,
which is why, again, as you said, I wish that he said something in some platform, but
yeah.
Oh well.
Which again, I agree with you that's what makes it all the worse is that like in general, I feel like because he's not saying anything, rightly or wrongly, it's kind of a tacit like, I don't think I did anything wrong. I really don't feel like apologizing.
Yeah.
And that's the part that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And it could not be true. Who knows? But the most important part to me is that Bueller is like the closest thing to like the person that'll correct people for saying bad strategy stuff on commentary. Like he's the most correct of people that are talking about Magic strategy.
Genuinely, yeah.
Yeah. So and he also has a vast knowledge of the players in the game, and like has a pretty good way to like bring up like relevant information. Like
I agree completely. He has a lot to offer and does a lot of things right. I am not trying to argue that. I'm
just giving credit where credit's due. Like I just want to make sure.
For sure.
It's easy to rag on people, and I think that what happened with Bueller is again bad that he's in the situation. He also reacted poorly in a situation that we expect people to act differently when the rain is when something bad happens to you like a car accident. We don't expect we expect people to act regularly, even though like if you're angry because of a car accident, it's understandable but not exactly totally cool.
Yeah.
So like whatever. It's an odd situation. He wasn't prepared to deal with it in a way that was okay. He had a complete lack of understanding.
And I don't think anything should change. I just think that it's very important for for him to be, you know, held accountable in some regard, which is why I tweeted about it and why I'm talking about it now. I don't think that it's something that we should pretend didn't happen. That's all.
I agree there.
All right, so we've been recording for about 4.5 hours now.
I had a great time.
It's going to be really fun to try and edit this down to 2, but, you know, it was definitely fun, and there's definitely a lot of good stuff in it. Do you have anything to say before we close it out?
Just that I recommend restraint when giving judgment for 2 reasons. One is that your judgment is not the judgment that matters. Not to say that it's irrelevant. I'm just saying that, like, you know, if you don't say anything, it's not gonna, like, I don't know, like, how can I put it differently? There's the adamancy of the opinion.
You tweeting in all caps, "I can't believe this guy's such a piece of shit," does not benefit anyone.
Right. Or similarly, like, to say, like, Chapin knew the rules, he deserved to know, like, whatever. Like, it's like, well, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Not saying anything's worth anything else. I'm just giving perhaps just another option. Everybody's got something inside them that they have to say no to.
Yeah.
And some people find it a lot harder to say no than others. I'm not saying that we should let alcoholics just drink themselves into oblivion and beat, you know, people up or whatever. What I'm saying is maybe understand that for them, playing the game in such a way that everything is on the letter is more difficult. And it's not to say that we shouldn't expect it from them, but I would think it's more important to at least understand that it's not exactly an even playing field to resist value on the table.
So what you're pleading for is, like, basic human empathy and realizing that not everybody's dealing with the same situation and operating with the same tools. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. We talked about a couple of somewhat controversial things, and Greg and I didn't always see eye to eye on everything. So what do you think? Which one of us do you agree with, or do you disagree with us both and think that we're idiots? Either way, please let us know. Comments below, or Twitter, or my stream chat, however you can contact me. I wanna know what you guys think. And while you're at it, let me know what you think of the show and what you think of Greg, because I had a lot of fun talking to him. The next episode is going to be with him again, as I said at the top. But I could definitely see him becoming a regular fixture of the show, because I always have so much fun when I get to hang out with him. And I also still need a bunch of suggestions for the show name, although at this point I'm not sure I'm going to use them, but I still want to know what you guys think the show should have been called or should be called. So this is still a pretty bare bones operation. The improvements are coming episode to episode, and I have lots more ideas of how to improve the show, what to do with it. So you should definitely, check out the rest of them. Keep watching. You can also follow the YouTube channel down below. Subscribe. Subscribe? Is that what they call it? Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll be helping me out a ton as I start to build whatever this is. You'll get to catch all the new episodes of this show, as well as another show that I'm coming out with, which is going to be a weekly thing that I do. The triumphant return of a fan favorite series, AJTV, will also be exclusively on this YouTube channel for a little bit. So that's a reason to follow. Some other video projects I'm doing, stream highlights that don't get axed by copyright robots. But yeah, thank you all so much for supporting me while I'm getting this off the ground, and I'll see you next time.
I thought I told you I have no convictions or opinions.